Hello, welcome to our group project presentation for our organizational behavior class. We are group 4. My name is Jeanette Campos, and today we're going to talk about the environmental issues by Nestle. So let's start talking about what is Nestle. Nestle is a Swiss-based company with the large food and bottled water production worldwide. As accompanied with international business, Nestle has given a lot of advantage at the social economical level in the world. However, his massive production had taken a large toll on the environment. Nestle Water is a division of Nestle and is actually the largest producer of bottled water in the world. The company counts with 48 water brands that are produced at 105 plants and are sold over 130 countries. As we can observe in this graph, from 2016 to 2018, the volume of Nestle white drop of water were over 125 million cubic meters for his business. The amount of water that I shown in the previous graph is actually as 0.0009% of the drinkable water worldwide. So Nestle is actually using half of this amount of water for the operational process and cleaning, and the other half is actually high quality bottled water for human consumption, which is actually the main company's reliance. The enormous volumes of bottled water that are produced by Nestle has caused national governments to investigate their business practices. These practices include the one, faithfully labeling ordinary tap water as a spring water, two, consuming more water than the company legal limit, and three, illegally draining used water without proper permits. Nestle Corporation is actually overusing the water of non-renewable aquifers. The practices of draining precious aquifer to sell bottled water, which I quote, by a company with the mission to offer sustainable water for humans' consumptions, has actually disadvantaged many cities around the world, leaving them without sustainable water sources and keeping them to rely them on Nestle for the drinking water they need. That was one of the cases in Pakistan, where the company used the resources for a brand of bottle called Pure Life, which does not even sell in this country as the population cannot afford it. So this draining water has also contributed to the depletion of the aquifers, denying the citizens in Pakistan to no access and benefit from these resources. In fact, the Pure Life brand bottle, it's not even sold in Pakistan. It is too expensive for the population. As Nestle keep resourcing water from endangered aquifers to lower the prices and use of permits to keep draining water, in 2015 there was a large controversy surrounding the Nestle company in California when the company continued to sell bottled water from local springs despite one of the worst local droughts that the region history was facing. Even today, Nestle still continues to extract water from the Californian canyons and selling them. So in this context, we can say that it becomes a rich the way Nestle continues to profit from underground water in times of crisis. The operations in Pakistan and the United States are actually a small part of Nestle's worldwide footprint. But these examples actually show us how the company has come to dominate a rightfully controversial global industry. Nestle comes with a long-term expansion plans for improving the profitability of its products, processes, and distributions. Since Nestle Water deals with so much water, the multinational allegates that it is committed to sustainable water use and continuous improvement of water management. By all of this, Nestle claims to recognize that our planet water resources face an insecure future in most of the world and that the responsible management of it by all of the water users it is absolutely necessity. On the other hand, the company can present problems of survival growth and profitability if economic superpowers like the United States, China, or the European Union decided to impose like strict regulations standards for obtaining and saving fresh water. Another issue that will impact the continued growth of Nestle will be the fallout of plastic packaging and the global fight against the petroleum based products and trash contamination. As Nestle hits lists of multinationals that provide benefits for human consumption, it is also the third most polluting brand in the world with plastic after Coca Cola and PepsiCo. The enormous amount of plastic generated by Nestle waters has shown the responsibility that the company has contaminating the environment with single use packaging. But aware of this, Nestle has implemented strategies to reduce its environmental impact, such as public relation campaigns and programs that promote addressing the growing crisis of plastic pollution. And as a massive producer of bottled water with a global reach and awareness, Nestle has the opportunity to establish itself as a leader against the rampant misuse of aquifer and the proliferation of single use of plastic packaging. In terms of aquifers, the corporation should embrace strategies including awareness of where their used water is draining, the recycling and the reuse of recovered wastewater, and also the protection of the existing water resources. After this, it is sure to say that the company must address these key issues to mitigate the disposal of its products by the public, but more importantly, to reduce the damage that the company production strategies cause to our environment. All of these can help foster consistent and sustainable growth for everyone in the earth because a company that decides of Nestle should set a reliable set of standards to move towards the reduction and eventual elimination of the disposable plastics. So for now, my classmate Alexandra is continuing with our analysis.
Nestle's aggressive and unethical business practices and strategies can be traced back to the company's starting years as a milk substitute company in Europe. After merging with the Anglo-Swiss Condensed Milk Company, Nestle had felt the effects of the First World War on their business. With the demand for milk and chocolate increasing, and the shortages of raw materials and limits on cross-border trade hindering the company's production, they had decided to expand their company further by buying refineries from the United States and signing supply agreements with Australian companies. These Australian companies would later be acquired by Nestle, along with other companies like Peter Collier Kohler and Alimentana. These acquisitions are early evidence of the company's aggressive and growing greed. To combat high mortality rates in the 1860s, Nestle's founder developed their own baby formula. This was the only admirable aspect of the company, but it failed to maintain their potential as a company with a clean reputation. Before the Anglo-Swiss Condensed Milk Company merged with Nestle, both companies had been selling rival versions of the other's original products. Nestle began to aggressively advertise their product to be almost as good as mother's milk. The problem with this, besides the statement being completely false, is that some of the families that Nestle were targeting did not have access to clean water or the necessary tools to boil water, like impoverished families or families from less economically developed countries, primarily Asia and Africa. These families were unable to read and understand the language in which sterilization instructions were written in due to low literacy rates. Nestle was aware of this problem, but the company simply ignored it and continued to encourage families to use their product. This aggressive promotion of their product with total disregard of unprivileged families contributed to the Nestle's growing reputation as a company with little regard to their own corporate social responsibility. The oblivious families ultimately mixed the baby formula in polluted water, making the formula hazardous to the babies. The consumption of this polluted solution had caused diarrhea, and since sources of medicine and good nutrition are not always available, these babies often die as a result. Although some families were able to read and understand the sterilization instructions in their native language, they lacked the facilities needed to boil the polluted water. Some families also used less baby formula than the recommended amount to make the formula last several uses. This meant that the babies were receiving less nutrition if they would have been breastfed. Even with access to clean water and proper quantities of the formula, breast milk was proven to be more nutritious and essential to infants. The International Baby Food Action Network had claimed that for a week, Nestle had given out free samples of their baby formula to families in hospitals and maternity wards. Since the infants got used to the baby formula instead of breast milk, it interfered with the mother's development of breast milk. Therefore, those families had to continue to buy the formula. When health experts and the International Baby Food Action Network brought to light Nestle's unethical and aggressive method of marketing and business, the company denied those allegations and recommended critics to focus on improving unsafe water supplies while simultaneously promoting their own water products, using their huge marketing budget to influence people's behavior. This manipulation and control over consumers' behavior is far from the company's founder's initial objective, which was to combat high mortality rates of infants. Additionally, it was discovered that in a study on breast milk substitutes that had been held in India and been directed by Nestle, the head medical research authority of that study persuaded the company to stop paying study participants, which included pregnant and breastfeeding mothers. These discoveries and allegations of the company's unethical business practices and aggressive promotion of their product caused several companies and organizations to boycott Nestle, despite the company's claims to be in compliance with WHO regulations and the Code for Breast Milk Substitutes. The code calls for countries to ban gifts from suppliers to healthcare workers because all health systems are vulnerable to bribery. After the initial boycott, Nestle again had been caught aggressively promoting their baby formula in hospitals and maternity wards in underdeveloped countries, finding loopholes and weaving around gray areas in the WHO regulations and code. A former Nestle employee by the name of Saeed Amir Raza had documented evidence of violations of the WHO regulations and code for breast milk substitutes by Nestle. Mr. Raza had been working as a salesperson for Nestle in Pakistan, pushing infant formula feed amongst doctors, nurses, and pharmacies. He had been receiving financial incentives from Nestle to lure doctors to unethically prescribe infant formula by the company. Even in areas where breastfeeding was readily available, the company proceeded with their unethical practices. This was in violation of the WHO Code for breast milk substitutes. Because of company policy, neither Mr. Raza nor his coworkers were aware of the code. They had not been exposed to it during training as Nestle employees. Mr. Raza had learned that the unfortunate side effects of bottle feeding when he witnessed the death of a 4-month-old baby at a hospital he was assigned to. A pediatrician explained to him that the infant's death was caused by bottle feeding. Mr. Raza's trust in the company was severed, and he immediately resigned and gathered enough evidence and documentation to issue a legal notice to Nestle. He gave the company a deadline to withdraw its infant formula and related baby food from the Pakistani market and requested that services of staff involved in the unethical marketing of practices be terminated. Nestle reacted with a series of threats, bullying Mr. Raza and his family out of Pakistan.
Has been around for many years, so obviously this company has found loopholes and has fallen below the ethical standards that are held for companies around the world. Having many ethical issues within this company, one in particular would actually be their water issues. Along with all the other issues, Nestle has earned themselves a spot in the top 20 most hated companies in America. So the water issue is specifically about their privatization of water. It's one to be highlighted. Last year in November, a Canadian group by the name of Wellington Water Watchers organized a conference to fight Nestle. The organization, or the conference name, was called All Eyes on Nestle. This conference brought together all the indigenous people and citizens who have been fighting Nestle from taking water from areas such as Canada, France, Brazil, and surprisingly the United States as well. They all discussed common strategies and exchanged information on how to resist this giant corporation's water grabbing, becoming clear that this is a common pattern of Nestle as it's taking water for its bottling facilities. Nestle has caused groundwater levels to sink, and they have affected ecosystems and have also endangered the water supply of local citizens within these specific areas. One specific area in particular is Vittel, France. They have been seeing an issue with this large consumption made by the company. Nestle, along with the community of Vittel, retrieve water from the same aquifer, and French state institutions recognized that the situation put at risk the aquifer since both parties' takings were longer than what the aquifer could replenish. The solution was to build a pipeline that would bring water from another location to supply the needs of the inhabitants of Vittel, allowing Nestle's consumption to go undisturbed and continue pumping groundwater from Vittel. Similar issues have arisen in Wellington County, where this company is allowed to extract 4.7 million liters of water per day. This has not received the consent of 6 nations on whose territory it operates. Similar situations are occurring in Florida, where water is still in recovery from overexploitation from Nestle and its inhabitants, yet Nestle is still allowed to pump water from Guinea Springs. In areas such as Brazil and Michigan, it shows that local groups have been trying to make desperate attempts to defend their water and protect the ecosystems in their areas, yet the state's water and environmental authorities have been siding with this big corporation. Nestle, which has found ways to merge with local authorities to give them spots on their environmental protection boards, have gotten away with this. They allow people to hold such high rankings within the company, which allows them to get away with the overexploitation of water. They establish alliances and partnerships with governments, which allows this company to protect its bottling operations and the extraction of water. Neither Nestle or local authorities have been thinking about the environmental effects that this mass extraction of water has been doing. Instead, it has been fought against solely by local volunteer groups that have a heart and passion for protecting their local government as well as the rest of the world. Focusing solely on the issue of water, it is no known fact that the Earth has been experiencing global warming for years. A few years ago, the United Nations declared that clean drinking water was a universal human right, and any calculated decision to deny or opportunistically package and sell basic human rights such as clean air would be scorned and ridiculed. Yet for over 30 years now, that is what has been happening with Earth's supply of fresh drinking water. This has caused water, which is necessary for survival, to be an unaffordable private commodity for the poorest people on Earth to even access. Due to corporations such as Nestle, thousands of people around the world are dying of thirst and disease. Greedy corporate profiteers play the biggest role over human welfare and life. The CEO of Nestle once stated that the idea of water as a human right is an extreme, which is controversial as it contradicts the United Nations and human rights organizations. In an interview, the former CEO of Nestle, Peter Brabeck, stated that it's better to give water a value so that we're all aware that it has a price. The inhumanity of this statement received an immense amount of backlash, as this video exposes the world's largest seller of bottled water going against the millions of people who struggle to access the little water that they need to even survive. There were even allegations aimed at Nestle claiming that this corporation had been restricting water access to several poor communities. Advocating for water privatization, Brabeck was the face of what this company was really doing and the role it holds regarding water in the world. In the early 2000s, Nestle began to push for making access to drinking water more of a right than it is a need. They drained their aquifers while completely disregarding environmental concerns or sustainable usage practices. The state of California obviously frequently finds itself in a drought, and Nestle never questions whether to remove their bottling facilities elsewhere where water may be in a more abundant supply. Newly appointed CEO of Nestle, Tim Brown, stated that if he could increase water bottling operations in California, he would. If anyone were to look into this corporation's paperwork, it would show that Nestle has been working without permits since 1988. Sourcing its water from forests such as San Bernardino, they have been operating without a permit, and there is absolutely no written record on their consumption. The state of California is not even aware of the amounts that they are taking, and they have no legal ground to enforce the company to share such information, which makes it easier for Nestle to get away with what they are doing. It is immoral that this private company can use as much water as they want while the rest of California faces restrictions and fines for their overusage. There are other areas of the world that have it even worse than California. When Flint, Michigan faced its water crisis, Nestle continued to use nearby water reserves for their bottled water products, leaving the citizens with no amount of clean water for themselves. This issue can also be traced to Pakistan, where in a small community of Bati Dilwan, a village councillor stated how children are being sickened by the filthy water due to Nestle's water bottling facility, which dug a deep well depriving locals of potable water. It's no surprise that this corporation is continuing to get away with such unethical and immoral actions, but it raises questions about how this company has been operating and how they're going to continue to operate. What are their plans for the future? How is the CEO going to lead this company? And what resolutions will they even be looking to find?
Nestle is a company that is able to provide services in other countries that need water, that don't have access to it easily. They could easily build their plants in places that aren't struggling to find the means to access their water. Nestle could potentially even donate water bottles to countries like Pakistan that can't afford to buy their water. And if they did start trying to do that, it could change the way people think about them. It will start to change the way people feel about the company. It wouldn't be an overnight turnover for them, but it will start getting them on the right foot. Even just having their waters be at a more affordable price could help the way that they are seen in Pakistan. Even in California, even if they move their plants into California, California sometimes does experience droughts, just like Pakistan does from time to time. It comes at no surprise that Nestle is the huge company that they are today. They don't only just sell water, but they also sell other products that people use in their baking. So they are able to make the profits that they make today and keep making profits. But if they could put those profits towards organizations and foundations that help provide water to places that are struggling to have water, they could eventually be able to then start rebranding, reevaluating how their company is seen, how their company is perceived, and by them being able to bottle their water with at a better ethical way. It could also change the way people perceive that company, how it's seen around the world, and how it's seen by other experts, and how it's seen by other shareholders. And could even bring them a bigger profit in the future. Nestle is sort of known to bottle groundwater and pass it off as spring water. Now, if Nestle changed the way they use the water, took spring water and actually filtered it, they could pass it off as being actual spring water. And if they stopped sourcing water unethically, like they did in Flint, Michigan, by pulling water out of other places, and people there are still struggling to find water and still paying for water that is tainted, it could change out their company in many ways. They did a thing of they donated water to Flint, Michigan to kind of say they were sorry, and if they could keep up doing that for other places that they sort of harmed, it could change the way the company functions in the long run. Another thing Nestle could potentially do in the future is work with other organizations or foundations that are already trying to provide water to places that are struggling. They could even make it their own organization, taking ideas from other organizations, but they kind of perfect it in a way that works for them. They could even team up with influencers that are partnered with other organizations or influencers that have been providing services to places that are struggling to find water that they need. This way, it can help them flow with new ideas into the company, and it can allow them to come up with things that could potentially help them perceive how it's seen. It could even change it from being one of the most hated companies in the world to being one of the most liked companies in the world. So all in all, if Nestle changed their ways of how they treat other countries or how they process their water or how they source their water and found better ethical ways of doing it, they could potentially see a different perception of how people see them and how people view the company as a whole.
Hi, this is Hui Can, and I'm going to talk about the recommendations of our presentation. We have 5 points. The first one is we think the Nestle company should acquire water permits and partner with the National Polluted Discharge Elimination System. Why? Because it's always benefit for the business if you have a good relationship with government, and the avail certificate will help improve the company's credibility and performance. The second one, the Nestle company should endeavor to stick to international water resource management. Why? Because this enables the Nestle to conduct business without compromising the interest and human rights for other companies. The third one, the Nestle company should follow environmental protection policies in any country. This part is just easy. Everybody should do that. And also gonna show the Nestle showing the company has the high regard and respect to the human race. Fourth one, the Nestle company should find a solution to the plastic bottles by using available and environmentally friendly bottle options. That way, the use of the recyclable water bottles help to protect the environment and reduce cost. The last one is stop all activities that have not abated permits and may damage the water resources environment. That is just how the company should do. They'll never pollute the environment. They'll never do things like that. So stop all the activities immediately would help the companies increase and save the company's reputation. For recommendation parts of our presentation. Thanks.